Hey everybody, today I'm out here in North Carolina taking a very quick look at the 2020 Toyota Prius Prime. This is Toyota's premier plug-in hybrid vehicle for 2020, but it is very soon going to be joined by a 2020 RAV4 plug-in hybrid. Although we don't know all the details of the RAV4 plug-in hybrid yet, we do know that the mission of the RAV4 is going to be different than this Prius Prime, as is evidenced by comparing a regular Prius to a regular RAV4. The RAV4 is going to focus on utility while giving us a plug-in hybrid range, and this vehicle is all about efficiency, gasoline efficiency and EV efficiency as well. The exterior style of the Prius Prime doesn't really change for 2020, so we still have these multi-module headlamps up front. These are full LEDs. We then have fog lamps down below, turn signals going on there as well that are LEDs. And then we have up front a radar sensor right behind that Toyota logo because Toyota Safety Sense is standard on all Prius Prime models. That gives us radar adaptive cruise control, autonomous braking, lane keeping, and pedestrian detection. Like the regular Prius, the Prime is a compact hybrid vehicle, so this is about the same size overall as a Toyota Corolla, but it is a liftback, so this entire section right back here, what would normally be the trunk lid and the rear window, that opens as one piece. And as you can see, we have a very strong wedge-like profile going on that helps improve the overall aerodynamic efficiency. Thanks to the liftback design and a relatively high roofline back here, we do find more headroom than we find in most compact sedans in America. So in addition to saving on gas, you'll also find a slightly more accommodating back seat in this. Out back, the styling is definitely differentiated between the Prius Prime and the regular Prius, but a lot of the elements are still here. We have full LED tail lamp modules, and then when you're looking through the rearview mirror, you're seeing out of this window up top and this window right here that is tinted below this wraparound light module. Toyota is a company that likes using common building block elements in their vehicles. So under this hood, we find essentially the same hybrid system that we see under the hood of the regular Prius and the Toyota Corolla hybrid. On this side, we have a 1.8-liter Atkinson cycle 4-cylinder engine. On the other side, we have the Toyota Hybrid Synergy drive transmission. Combining everything together, we get 121 horsepower total. That's the combination of the power delivered by the engine right here and power pulled from the battery pack and powering the electric motor on the other side. Now, unlike other hybrid technologies out there, like the Hyundai Ioniq, we don't have just one motor generator unit on the other side. We have two different motor generator units inside the Hybrid Synergy drive transmission case. Some folks have called this a CVT, or continuously variable transmission, and yes, it can sort of act like that, but I think that dismisses the real innovation behind Hybrid Synergy drive. Unlike a traditional belt and pulley style CVT, which is what we do see in other hybrid systems out there, most notably some of Nissan's hybrid systems, this vehicle can operate more like an electric vehicle at a wider range of vehicle speeds, thanks to the very beefy MG2 motor that we find inside that case. If you want to know more about how Hybrid Synergy drive works, we do have separate videos just on that hybrid system. But that hybrid system really is the key to how this vehicle operates. Since the MG2 motor is already pretty big in every Toyota hybrid vehicle out there, it's not a big deal to put a bigger battery pack in the back and allow you to drive electric only. And that's exactly what we see in the Prius Prime. The combination of everything gives you 25 miles of electric-only range, after which this will operate just like a regular gasoline hybrid. So you don't ever have to plug this in if you don't want to, and if you never plug it in, you'll be getting 54 mpg. If you do plug it in, that bumps up to 133 mpge according to the EPA on their silly mpge scale. These numbers are really the key to understanding the Prius Prime. 54 miles per gallon when operating as a hybrid, 133 miles per gallon when operating as an electric vehicle. Toyota is very focused on overall efficiency with this vehicle, not EV range, and that's something that a lot of folks don't really understand. When you take a look at something like a Chevy Volt, which is, by the way, no longer manufactured for the 2020 model year, it was focused on EV range, and it gave up an awful lot in terms of overall efficiency, both when operating as a hybrid vehicle or an electric vehicle, to give you that longer EV range. Toyota went after this a little bit differently, and a lot like the Hyundai Ioniq, because the Ioniq is really the only direct competitor to this vehicle in the US. Both of these vehicles have very similar themes: high efficiency, not too much horsepower going on under the hood, but very high MPG and MPGe numbers. The smaller battery pack really is the key to this vehicle's high fuel efficiency, because when you think about it, when this vehicle is operating as an electric vehicle, the gasoline engine under the hood is just a boat anchor that you're dragging around with you. And similarly, when you're operating this as a hybrid vehicle, the big battery pack in the rear is not really giving you much benefit. So by downsizing both of these components, giving you a relatively smaller battery pack in the rear than you find in a battery electric vehicle or something like that Chevy Volt, and by giving us a smaller engine under the hood than we find in something like a Honda Clarity, we've been given better fuel economy both for electric mode and for hybrid mode. A common question or concern with hybrids and plug-in hybrid vehicles has been how long will the battery last, how long will the hybrid system components last? Well, Toyota's really been able to answer this because of their long history with the Prius, and the answer seems to be a really long time. There are Priuses out there with 200, 300,000 miles out there, and yes, the battery has degraded to some point where they're not getting the same fuel economy that they did when they're new, but they're still fully functional, still driving down the road every day. To help alleviate some of those concerns, for 2020, they've really bumped up the warranty on their new hybrid vehicles, giving the battery a 10-year, 150,000-mile transferable warranty. That's going to be a little bit different than some of the warranties we see in the competition, which are not transferable. In addition to the upgraded battery warranty, the rest of the hybrid system itself in the vehicle is now going to be warranted for 8 years and 100,000 miles nationally. Changes on the inside are relatively minor. We still have height adjustable shoulder belts up front and two-way adjustable headrests. The color scheme is still very black on black in this model, and we have some more black accent trim on the inside, which they're calling more premium for 2020. The dashboard design is still basically the same as before, where we have this dual LCD setup right here at the top of the instrument cluster. I'll go ahead and close the driver door so you can see that other display. We have the instrument cluster over here, and then the sort of trip computer display right there in the middle. Some lights over there on the other side. And then moving down from there, we have the large LCD that we first saw when the Prius Prime was launched. The big change here for 2020 is that, as you can see, we now have smartphone integration in this screen, and it's displayed in this upper section of the screen like we see in other vehicles that have a tablet orientation large LCD like this. Now, unlike the large tablet screen that we see in the latest Subaru models, this bottom portion of the screen is a little bit more useful when Apple CarPlay is in operation, because as you can see, I can either get media readouts here, so if I were to change the source and be listening to, for instance, FM, I could still have Apple CarPlay above that while I have the infotainment down there below, or the climate controls below, so we do have the choices of those, but that's really all we can get at the bottom, so there is still a little bit of a limitation. Over here we have another button, the home button, which takes us to, for instance, this map interface, where we can get also the info screens read out there, like the energy screen, for instance. If that loads, there we go. The menu button pulls up this particular screen where we have direct access to CarPlay, the app suite, phone, entering a destination, or those info screens again. Very similar info screens to what we see in the rest of the Prius lineup, where the energy is going right there. We can also get some different views on that large screen, depending on what you want. We have information on the battery, engine, and climate control right there. We then have the controls for the single zone automatic climate control system, temperature over here, volume and power for the infotainment system over there on the right. Again, very much like we had in the last model, but the trim has been slightly changed for 2020. Below that we have the same joystick style shifter that we've had before. Park is over here, drive mode buttons over here. We can switch between hybrid and EV mode with this button, or choose EV Auto right over there for that. If you want to charge the hybrid battery, then you can press and hold this button and the vehicle will engage the charge mode. Just keep in mind that's going to give you lower overall efficiency than just letting the car do its own thing. There's a Qi wireless charging mat right there between the footwells, the controls for the heated seats, and then two very large cup holders right there in the center console. Behind that we have an armrest that opens to the side. There's a USB interface and auxiliary input there, 12-volt power port just before that. And then this is a pretty deep storage area. You can put a large smartphone in there with absolutely no problem. The steering wheel is the same basic design that was seen before with 3 spokes. We find the infotainment controls over here on the left side of the steering wheel, volume up, down, track forward, backward. There's also a trip button for the trip computer up there in that instrument cluster, dedicated phone and voice buttons over here. And then on the right side of the steering wheel, we have some of the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control system. This is where we find the distance and the lane keeping assistance. But like other Toyota vehicles, the cruise control is mainly down here on this stalk. That's a little bit different than Toyota's latest steering wheel design that we do see in the RAV4, Camry, etc. Then this button right here controls that multifunction LCD that was to the right of the instrument cluster. That's where we find things like the drive monitor there, the digital clock, turn-by-turn navigation directions, infotainment, climate control readouts, status of the active safety systems, certain vehicle settings, etc. There's the typical Toyota Eco Diary, the energy monitor, of course, the hybrid system indicator, fuel consumption records, all that sort of stuff is going on right there, just to the right of where we find the miles per hour. The big practicality change for 2020 is that we now get a 5th seat belt in the Prius Prime. If you recall, 2019 and prior had 4 seats, 2 across the back, nothing right here in the middle, but we now have this little seat belt right here. That could be a big differentiator for some folks that were trying to debate between a Prius and a Prius Prime, but really needed that extra seat belt. The rear seats fold in a 60-40 fashion, but as you can see, it's not completely flat with the cargo area in the back. That's because the cargo area is about 4 or 5 inches taller than in the regular Prius. You'll also notice that height difference when you open up the rear hatch. The cargo area is a little bit shallower than we find in the regular Prius, again because of that bigger battery pack. There's a small storage compartment right up front where you could put the charge cable for the vehicle. You can also put the roller cargo cover in that area if you want to. But as you can see, you can fit a 22-inch roller bag that way right there under the roller cover quite easily. So this is still cargo practical, just not quite as cargo practical as the regular Prius. But on the other hand, you can fit far more cargo back here than you can in the average plug-in hybrid midsize sedan. Unfortunately, I've had a very limited amount of time with this 2020 Prius Prime, so I'm not going to put a drive section in this video. Instead, I'm just going to post the last scores from the last time we had this in for a full review right above my head. Nothing has changed for the Prius Prime in the way that it drives. So this still handles much better than previous generations of the Prius, but it still handles quite similarly to the current generation Prius. This is not going to outhandle some of the competition that is a little bit more performance oriented. So for instance, if you were to take a look at something like a Clarity plug-in hybrid or an Optima plug-in hybrid, they're going to be more expensive than this. They're going to have wider, grippier tires. They definitely have a better feel out on the road in terms of overall handling ability, but they're not going to give you the same kind of fuel economy that we find in the Prius. They may give you more range, but they're not going to be as efficient. And again, remember that Toyota's mission when designing the Prius Prime was to focus on efficiency, give you a usable real-world range that most Americans will find very good, but not really focus on that range target like we see in some of the competitive vehicles out there. Toyota tells us that most plug-in hybrid owners in America, not just Prius Prime owners, but most plug-in hybrid owners, period, spend less than $50 a month in gas. That means that most plug-in hybrid vehicle owners out there are really not driving beyond the capacity of that battery. According to independent studies, the average American's commute is about 10 miles or so a day. So most of those American consumers will be perfectly suited by this plug-in hybrid. But again, this will operate at 54 mpg beyond that battery. So if your commute is, say, 30 miles round trip every day, the first 25 miles could be EV only, and then after that you'll be getting 54 mpg, and your gas tank will last you months if you're in that window. If you live in a mountainous area, then it may be worthwhile to get the Prius Prime over the regular Prius. I go up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass every day, and even though this vehicle is lugging around that bigger battery pack in the rear, we got better fuel economy in this than we did in the regular Prius. Now, how is that possible? Well, the big reason is that when you go down that 2,200-foot mountain pass, the regular Prius's battery pack fills up about a quarter of the way down the hill. And this was able to keep regenerating electricity back into the battery pack and giving us that better overall fuel economy. Now, obviously, you couldn't go back up the hill with the energy that is recuperated going down the hill, but it does help improve the overall fuel economy to the point where this got slightly better fuel economy than the regular Prius in my daily commute. So if you're regularly traveling on mountain passes, that would be a good reason to get this over something like the regular Prius. For 2020, Toyota's pricing continues to be pretty aggressive. $27,600 is where the base Prius Prime will start. And remember that this will still qualify for its maximum federal tax credit. That's one of the big reasons that we no longer see the Chevy Volt on sale in America. Its federal tax credit has started to sunset, and that made the Volt significantly more expensive than competitors like the Prius Prime or the Ioniq plug-in. Now, because the federal tax credit is based on battery capacity, this does not get the same large $7,500 tax credit we found on the Chevy Volt. This gets about $4,500 off from the feds. But that still will drop your effective price on the Prius Prime down to about where the Prius is, depending on your tax situation. So if you're looking at a Prius and you're thinking you might be able to plug it in, you will be able to lower your operating costs by selecting a Prius Prime over the regular Prius. Now, if you want the fully loaded model, which is what we've been looking at today, this will end up just over $33,000 before tax, title, license, and of course destination. That puts the Prius Prime in a slightly different category than something like the upcoming RAV4 plug-in hybrid. Again, we don't have very many details on that just yet, but you can expect that that will be more expensive than the Prius. The regular RAV4 hybrid is definitely more expensive than the regular hybrid Prius, so you can apply that same logic over there to the RAV4 plug-in. This is also going to be a little bit less expensive than some of the other competitive plug-in hybrids out there, something like an Optima plug-in hybrid or the Sonata plug-in hybrid, because they're in a different category. But this is very, very similarly priced to the Hyundai Ioniq hybrid. And of course, the Ioniq hybrid and plug-in hybrid are both lift-back vehicles, just like the Prius lineup. Some might say that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and Hyundai certainly copied the successful design of the Toyota Prius, but they've also done an excellent job at making that Ioniq very, very fuel efficient. Now, in real-world driving situations, the Ioniq may not get the same numbers that we see here in the Prius Prime, but it is going to be awfully close. The big differentiator prior to 2020 was that the Ioniq offered some features that we didn't find in this vehicle, like the 5th seat belt in the back, Apple CarPlay integration in the head unit, but for 2020, Toyota has really fixed those problems in the Prius Prime and made this a more solid competitor to that Hyundai. So which one is right for you? Well, you'll have to let me know down there in the comments section below. And of course, stay tuned because we will have one of these in for a full and complete review where we can make that analysis at that time. In the meantime, just hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. Be sure and find us over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, and I'll see you all next week.